Hey, welcome back, guys. So, what we have now is this table which I just created using the Axios call from our API, which is this resource, right? It's the URL controller. So, if I show you the Thunder client output, what you can see is basically we have the pagination data, for example current date, current page, first page URL, stuff like that. And then we have the data property which holds the actual data of the two URLs which we have. Okay, so when we want to create this thing on our application, right, the list, when we need to show it, there are multiple ways of doing it. And the one which I like to do is, first of all, define the entire structure or the shape of the object which will come, right? And then we use that thing with TypeScript so that it becomes a bit easy to work with. And obviously, it's type hinted. We are defining the data properties. Now, this is something which I have also done in my Doctor app as example. So I will go through the code and I will make you understand what am I doing. All right, so the breadcrumb thing is already clear to us. This is a state that I'm maintaining, that whether the data is loading or it has loaded, stuff like that. Very straightforward. Although I haven't used it, my um, thought process here is that I will have some kind of a loader thing when I get that component. But till that point, I'll keep this. So what happens is, in the use effect, I'm setting that set the loading property to be true at first. So what is going to happen is, let's just say there is a component which shows a loader. So initially the logic will be that if my loading is true, then the component renders itself. Okay, and that's how I'll have the loading state. Then I fetch the URLs. So that fetch URL is an async function which does this. It makes an API call. Maybe I should keep it as void. I don't know. No. Okay. And then I change it back to false. So because it is not loading again, right? And that's how we get that effect of maintaining the state of loading and then loaded. Now, in here, if you see the second use state hook, the second state variable that I am using is URL data. Okay, and this is set URLs. Maybe I'll change this as well a little bit. Set URL data, that makes sense. Okay, and over here URL data is fine. It is set to be either ipaginated URL or null, and by default I'm setting this as null. And then I use this function to set that data when the response comes from the Axios call. But then, what is paginated URL? This is important to understand. So the paginated URLs is an interface which extends ipaginated data. Now, what is ipaginated data? Well, we'll come to that. But in here, you can see the data is defined to be array I URL, which means the ipaginated URLs has a data property, which is an array of I URL. So let's go to first the ipaginated data. This is exactly what we get from the paginated response of Laravel. Why? Because if I go to URL controller index, I have URLs which is going through pagination query. Okay, I'm sending 10. So that's why we have this code. Okay, now in here the data is said to be unknown. It is a fact because when I am defining ipaginated data, I don't know what is the kind of data which is coming. It can be a string, it can be an array of objects, whatever it is, I don't know as of now. So what I did, I don't know if there is a better way to do it, but I extended ipaginated data in this ipaginated URLs, and I said that in here I know what the data is going to be. It is going to be an array of IURL. So that generally, makes sense to me. It is working. So yeah, this is fine. If there is any better method, then definitely comment below and I'll definitely change that. But so far it is working fine. Now, what is IURL? IURL is the model of URL. I have these properties and then it extends iModel because the ID created at and updated at is going to be common. So I thought, why don't we save some time and effort? So any model which is extending, or other any interface which is extending iModel, will automatically get those properties. So it just makes life a little easier. Okay. So IURL is defined. And now what happens is, because this state knows that it can be either null or ipaginated URL, if you see, the moment I get that response, I set it to this data, right? And over here, this URL data, which I'm sending to link table, gets the entire hint. Okay. For example, if I do data 0 and then a dot, you will see the entire properties of URL, including the ID created at and the updated at, because that's what the extend is allowing me to do. So get this back to the original form, and let's look at the last component in this thing, which is links table. Open it up, and the first thing which I have defined over here is that this table, which is only responsible for displaying the table, not the pagination, right? This table will get the data, an array of URLs, and it will do its thing. So initially I have my T head, then the T body. This is something which I've taken from Daisy UI, so nothing extraordinary, to be very honest. See components, table. This is what I'm using. The only thing which I have done is I've taken this thing and added that inactive and active. Inactive, I think the condition is wrong. If URL active equals true, this is strange. Active is 1, and let me see URL interface. Okay, so I think what is happening is, let me look at the Thunder client thing. Active is 1. What if I go over here? So there is something called as casting. So I'm thinking, if I come over here, let's look at the Laravel documentation. Cast, date casting, enum array. So how does the cast work? Enum casting, casts, Laravel Boolean cast, Laracast as usual. So casts published Boolean. Fair enough. So let's do that. Protected dollar casts equals, this is an array, and I'm saying two of the properties. Active is Boolean, correct? Yeah. And failing is Boolean as well. Now if I send the request, perfect, this is working, which will mean now in here these two are active, and now if I change this to inactive, okay, the query takes it away. So that's problem. I'll have to change that for individual user, because yes, the query is with a condition that only active ones are visible, so that's fine, but at least it is working properly. That's what I wanted to show you. The casting helped me not do some fancy things like if it is one then do this or that. Okay, this is how the boolean thing should ideally work. Fine. So this badge is something which I added from this daisy UI thing, which is also a part of the table but not the basic one. So that's something which I have changed. It has a hover, and if I am not wrong, I don't get that hover. Let me add that. So how does the hover come in? Overflow tr class hover. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. I can add that. Tr class name equals hover, and now I should be able to get that. Yep, this is fine. Failing, if it is true, red, green. For now, let's keep that, because later on I will have a component. So if I have failing, it will definitely become red. Right. So yeah, let's go back to our front end code. What we are saying is this badge is added. Obviously, if the URL failing is true, then we show a green badge. If it is failing false, then we show a green badge. Otherwise, we show a red badge. Yes, and then we have this updated at. I will have a helper function which will kind of modify this into something very meaningful. But yeah, that's how the basic table is coming. So a quick recap: we have this page where we are keeping this state of loading data. We have this data as another state hook. We use the use effect to fetch the data on the component mount. We make this API call and a seg function. We get the data, we have defined the type of the data, and then we have this links table which gets the response data, which is the collection of our URLs, and the table is just responsible in showing the data which is being sent to it right through the props. So that's about it, guys. That's how simple this entire thing is. In the next video, I'm going to create the form first. Let us get a little more familiar with the formic thing, and then we will look at the pagination part as well. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, do click on the thumbs up icon and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.